In the unforgotten country, our paths are lined by lodestones from the past and the present, broken planters, magnificent grievances, the warnings of our ancestors, and the spirits who wait for us in dark places to urge us to take good care of ourselves and each other.
Hello. My name is Denise Matsuoka. I'm on the board at the Japanese American Museum of San Jose. Thanks everyone for coming. And this came about because I had seen a presentation by Amanda at the Poston Pilgrimage last fall, and I thought it was fascinating. And I thought that there was a lot to offer for, in particular, agriculture in the Bay Area. So I'm going to let her and her team talk more about that, but that's how we got started and why we're here today. So my co-hosts for the program are Amanda Kim from Kansha History, Larry Hirahara, the seed guy from Asian Cultural Experience of Salinas, and I also wanted to call out so that you all can say hi to Tom Izu, our board president, is here. Steve Fujita, our interim treasurer, is here from the board. And Vanessa Hatakayama, our executive director. So be sure to say hi to them as well. The museum typically closes at 4, but we're keeping it open an extra hour. We encourage you to go over there. There is an agricultural exhibit that you can check out. You can also see the gallery and our rotating exhibit, which is about topaz. And I talked to somebody here who spent some time at Topaz, so you might want to check that out as well. I also would like to thank Wesley for the use of their facility. They've been super fantastic in letting us spread out. If we tried to do this at JAMsj, we would be real squeezed into a little tiny space. So thanks for that. There are a number of JAMsj volunteers here. They're all wearing JAMsj t-shirt. If you have any questions about anything to do with the museum, feel free to talk to any of them. Thanks, and I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Thanks, everybody. It's so great to be here. I'm really honored to be invited here to this location and to have this opportunity to speak to all of you. We have a couple of components to today's program. We're going to have a speaking, just this part. We're going to have a Q&A, and Farmer Larry is going to show people how to grow their own plants. But also critically important, we also have volunteers in the back who are helping you look up your farm record and print them out, and they can also email them to you so that you can have them and hopefully restore a chapter in your own family's history. First of all, let's get a sense of who's in the room. How many people here have done farm work? Raise your hands. Whoa, a lot of you. Wow, look at that. How many of you had parents who did farm work? Look, even more. Great. How many of you had grandparents who did farm work? Look at that. And then great-grandparents who did farm work? Great-grandparents. So that's almost all of you. Almost everybody in this room has some kind of agricultural roots, right? And so half of Japanese Americans prior to World War II were directly involved in agriculture, and many more were involved in related fields, shipping, packing, produce people, all of that. And so agriculture is actually a really big part of our history. And because of alien land laws, many Japanese Americans could not directly own land, right? And so they had Nikkei agreements, they had a lawyer who held the land, they had a lot of complicated relationships to the land. What we're going to talk about today are these War Relocation Authority records that are held at the Bancroft Library. They include a lot of information that's directly pertinent to you and your lives and your stories. So thank you very much. I want to, as we kick off, also recognize that we have a number of Kansha History Project volunteers in the room. And if you could just hold your wave, stand up and wave, right? Yay, thank you, thank you. So, and also in the back. So these are the volunteers who have been working for, in most cases, actually more than a year, usually 2 years, to very dedicatedly transcribe these records so that they'll be available to you. So thank you very much, Kansha History volunteers. So let me tell you how I came into this project. Actually, I had been doing health and human. I'm Yonsei, let me start there. I'm Yonsei, and I grew up on a farm in Satakoy, California. And so I worked the fruit stand, I did farmers markets, I did all that stuff. And then my dad's side, the Korean side, he was a produce wholesaler. So always in the background was my dad talking about Japanese American farmers just all over the state. And so I had this passive learning about the extent of Japanese American farming. So I had both. But what I brought today were the photographs of my grandparents. It's Katsumi Hata, Kieko Hata, when they first met, and then them in their older years. And then this bottom photo is from JAMsj, and it's part of their collection at JAMsj, and it shows the Matsuoka family farm in Norwalk, California. And my bachan is the biggest little girl on the left. This photo shows is sort of a very typical Japanese American farm in terms of size, about 40 acres. It shows the family labor that's involved on the farm. You know, all these little girls work. The mother, you know, how much labor she had to do as well. So I had worked in health and human services. I had left the farm, worked professionally, and then I got involved in food shed issues, which is to ensure that you have a healthy food supply, and that has to do with agriculture. And I found myself going back to agriculture meetings and meeting with farmers again. And I attended a very large workshop where they were talking about dry farming, and the speaker, who was an international expert, said, "Oh yeah, you could only dry farm vines and trees, and it has to be in this particular type of environment." And I said to the speaker afterward, I said, well, my grandparents grew vegetables in Palos Verdes, California, as dry farmers. And the expert, the international expert, said to me, that's not possible. And they had been farming, if you've been to Palos Verdes, you know that Ishibashi is a very famous family, and they had been farming there since 1908-ish, and prior to that, there had been other farmers on that land. So I'm told that they'd been dry farming there for about 50 years total before the incarceration. So then I thought, well, this is an important story. Like, let's show people how to dry farm in California. This is necessary. So I went and I did the research at CSU Dominguez Hills. I found the lease that said they were dry farmers. Easy peasy. In that file, I also found that my grandfather had been part of a Claims Act. There was a Japanese American Claims Act, and that he had won, and along with all these other people. And that told me that there was more files, there was more information. My own family did not believe that he actually pursued this claim, right? Because he was very humble, and I think in my lifetime, he would have been very recognizable as a Japanese American gardener, right? So no one knew that he had taken this action. So in the discovery of looking for more information about my grandfather, about my Jichan and Bachan, I came across these records. And this record showed, it says Ishibashi et al., and then at the bottom it says tenancy by 12 individuals. And those 12 individuals are the individuals named in the claim. They're located in Strathmore. So they had to leave Military Area 1, Palos Verdes, and actually these San Pedro growers were evacuated at the same time as the Terminal Island people. They were encouraged to move inland. So they moved inland into this area called Strathmore, and the size of the land, you can see on the left, is 640 acres. 640 is kind of a magic number. It's 1 square mile. It shows the person who actually owned the land, a person by the name of Barney Schuler, who was not from California and did not really understand the anti-Japanese hostility of the time. You can see that they had already put in 75 acres of tomatoes, 20 acres of squash. They had built housing for 150 people. So they had built housing for everybody in the Palos Verdes Peninsula. So this is new information for me. I knew that they had moved there. I knew that there were protests. I knew that they were threatened many times. But I did not know that their community was this big and that they fully intended to take care of such a big community. Soon after this, of course, they are sent directly to Poston, and that was the basis for their claim. When I found this record in the Bancroft Library in these very large, unindexed PDFs, I knew instantly that these would be of importance to so many people beyond me, of course. And so I tried to find an institutional partner who would join me in transcribing them. I wasn't able to find one, and I happened at that time to have a research grant to work on my own book, and I asked the funder if I could use that research grant to fund this project, and that's how this project came to be. So these are War Relocation Authority records. We think based on the ages of the evacuee operator that this was recorded in the spring of 1942. There were 7,000 records in this data set. A lot of them turned out to be duplicates. I think at the end of the day, California ended up being 5,674 records, And then we're working on the Pacific Northwest right now. So we developed a project, and we developed a volunteer-powered, community-based history project called Kansha History, and we have a fiscal sponsor named Community Partners. And our motto is every record is a precious human story, because when you look at these records, you can see that it goes beyond data. It actually goes into people's lives and their own stories. So we've got a 3-part mission. The first is to connect people to their own family histories. The second is accountability, in that we want to appreciate the full contributions of Nikkei farmers, which is a lost history in some ways. And then, when possible and when necessary, revise the historical record and change how archives hold information that is very personal and also very dear to us, right? This is information that when we go out, dozens of people, they want it, they send in emails all the time. So how are we different in how we want to take care of the data? We want to apply principles of ethics. So our first goal is to make sure that in terms of the data we hold and gather, always benefits the person whose name is represented on the card, right? The data subject. How does this benefit the person who'd be considered the data subject? That person always has authority to control the data. So if they say, we don't want this on your website, or we don't want it included, we will take it down. We have a responsibility to be accountable to this community as well. And then we have an ethical purpose, which is how do we make sure that this data is only ever used to benefit Japanese Americans and never harm Japanese Americans? Because as many of you know, lots of data projects have already taken place that have harmed Japanese Americans. So when we finish a region, what we do is we call farmers and we say, hey, we've got this data set, and then I give them the data and I ask them, what do you want us to do with it? Inevitably, or so far, maybe not inevitably, but so far, they've asked us to give a presentation at a local Buddhist temple. So that's what we do. We follow their guidance and we release it that way. We've been really blessed to have so many wonderful volunteers sign up for this project in our very short history. We've completed 200 volunteer shifts. These are 10-hour shifts. We've recruited over 100 volunteers ranging in age from 13 to 83. They have transcribed thousands of records. We've had 1,000 community members come out, even though we're just really a pop-up project. And we've had many wonderful partners join us as well. We are largely community funded because there are not very many sources of funding for projects like ours. In our thanks, let's also give thanks to our ancestors and take a quick minute to look at the contributions of Nikkei farmers. So this data is from something called the final report of the participation of the Farm Security Administration in the evacuation of Japanese Americans. For a brief period of time, a bureau in the USDA was moved over to the Wartime Civil Control Administration to facilitate the transition of farms from Nikkei farmers to non-Nikkei farmers. This is some data from their report. 2% of all farms were managed by Japanese Americans, but less than 1% of all the farmland was held by Japanese Americans. They produce 7.5 times more value per acre. There were in this census about 6,000 farms, 200,000 acres, and I personally believe this is an undercount. At that time, they sold about 40 million in crops, but then they had 100 million invested in the land. If you recall that photograph of my bachan and my great-grandparents, they had crops, tractors, they had conditioned the land, they had irrigation. All of that is a huge investment. Before World War II, Nikkei farmers were responsible for 40% of California's agricultural wealth. So I'm really glad to introduce to you today, we're going to have a couple of volunteers talk about what the experience is like for them to work for Kansha History Project, to be volunteers, kind of the emotional effort and the reasons why they do it. And so I'd like to invite up Elizabeth Newman, who is a longtime Kansha History volunteer, a wonderful human being, and she's here to help.
Thank you, Amanda. So I'm Elizabeth. I started volunteering with the project May of 2024, and I got involved when a friend of mine who knew that I was working on my own family genealogy project sent me this email with the volunteer information saying, hey, I think this might be your thing. So I looked into it, and sure enough, it was definitely my thing. As a part of my own family research, there was this gap I had between 1940 and 1942. I knew that my grandparents were married in 41, so the records I had for them in 1940, they were no longer living there, so I had no idea where they were, and I was kind of looking for that information. All I knew, and I knew, that they were somewhere in the Sacramento Delta and that they grew strawberries, and I was dead set on that. So I submitted my information, and I didn't know what name the land might have been under. My family stayed together as a group. There was my grandfather, his older brother, and then their father, my great-grandfather. I didn't know whose names. I didn't know if it'd be under Japanese names or kind of their American names. So I submitted everything, and when I got my card back, I got to see this. I got to see my card. So I looked at the top, and I was like, George M. Inoue. So that's my grandfather, and it makes sense that it would have been in my grandfather's name because his older brother and their father were both born in Japan. And a lot of times, leases were made in the person who had citizenship. So that was true for my grandfather. And then it turns out that it was under George and not Mitsuru, which is his middle name. And so I was like really excited to see that. And then I look down and I see pears. Well, strawberries are not pears. So I go straight to my dad and I say, hey, Dad, check out this card. It says that they grew pears. And he's like, yeah, they totally grew pears. They had a pear orchard before the war. They didn't grow strawberries until they returned to California after camp. And I was like, I had no idea. And the funny thing about that is I didn't know that I didn't know. So I never would have asked the question. So this conversation turned into something bigger. He started telling me about farming, what he remembered as a child. He described the packing sheds, and that Grandma would take him to work, kind of put him under the table where she was working, give him some toys and some food, and while she worked in the packing shed. He also described the Japanese baths that were nearby, and that was kind of neat. So we had this full conversation. And what was really even more poignant is my dad was sick at the time, and he actually passed away a month later. So I got to have that moment with him, and it was really, really meaningful for me. If anyone is interested in volunteering, you really should, because you never know what kind of conversations that it could lead to. And Amanda and the team, they have it down. It's pretty amazing. It's really structured. When I started, we were transcribing the entire card. Now it's split up into 3 groups, affectionately named growers, harvesters, and planters. When you volunteer, you get a full training, and it's all on Zoom, so you can just do this from your home. You can do it on your computer in your favorite room, and Amanda will train you, and then you're assigned onto a team. When people first start out, they're usually assigned to the growers and the harvester teams, and they do the transcription part. And all you have to do is copy the information word for word, letter by letter, into a spreadsheet. You'll get an email from your coach, is kind of your team leader. Yuri is actually mine. Where's Yuri? She's the best. If you get to work with Yuri, you're very lucky. But they will send you an assignment, and you just click, and it opens up a Google folder, and inside will be a spreadsheet, and then the cards that you're working. And you just go, you open up a card, and then you just put the information in line by line. If you're assigned to one of the grower teams, you'll just be transcribing or copying down the information on the top half of the card. This is the evacuee operator section and the substitute operator information. If you're a harvester, then you do the bottom half of the card and you just put in the crop information and the structures on the property information. And that's it. And you can kind of go at your own pace. It's no pressure. It actually goes by pretty quickly. The third part of the volunteer experience is the packers. And that's pretty much what I do. And that's the research portion of it. In order for families to find their ancestor, they have to go by the names. And like mine, I didn't know what name it would be under, which family member, which names. We look at the card. And so for mine, George M. Inoue, if I was researching my own card, I would make sure that the spelling is correct. Sometimes, the field agents, sometimes they get like a letter that's a little off, or sometimes they misspell it entirely. Sometimes they take a wild guess, and it's really a crazy search. But the other thing that we do is if there's any initials on there, we try to identify the initials, because that also helps family members. Maybe they only knew him by Mitsuru. Maybe they only knew him by George. Sometimes we get cards where it's just like S and a last name, or first initial, last name. We have to try to figure out that first initial. And that process, we do a lot of cross-checking with, everything that we can find. We use census records, we use military and veterans records, draft cards as a treasure trove because they were created mostly in like 1941, 1942. So we can cross-check the address and make sure that we have the right person that matches the right initial. We even look at obituaries because a lot of times that's how family members remember them, so I can find nicknames that they might search under. Every card that I look at, it's really, really rewarding for me. I'm intensely proud of the Japanese American community of this generation. There was a lot of loss, but really what I like to focus on and see is all that they rebuilt. It's just kind of an amazing experience, and I get just a little glimpse of people's histories and what they were able to do and achieve, and that's really special to me just as a community. I'm very grateful to this project, and I'll talk about karmic conditions all coming together. It's really fantastic. So, yes, thank you very much. Oh, I forgot to show the other picture. There we go. Those are my grandparents. They were married in 1941, and there is my great-grandfather. That might be a pear orchard. It's an undated photo, but it'd be really funny if that was a pear orchard, and I had it the whole time, and I was thinking strawberries, so.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We provide online supports as well, and so we have a community online, and we have a range of volunteers in age, and so there's always somebody who can onboard you. Also, we have the structure where we have coaches who are very specialized volunteers. This really is volunteer power. So I want to invite up one of our longstanding coaches, Yuri Sasaki, who is in charge of some of our most complex data transcription projects. I also want to mention that there are other data transcribing projects, like the National Archives has a citizen transcription program, and they are working on the records currently. The big focal piece is our records of the Revolutionary War. That is so far outside of our time frame that we felt it was really important to get this information to the communities who need it now, right, aging communities. Come on up, Riri.
Thanks very much, Amanda. I'm a Sansei, originally from San Francisco, but I lived here in San Jose for about the last 40 years, so this is now home. I started the Kansha project, about in December 2023, when I saw an ad in Facebook that said there was some kind of a Nikkei project dealing with farming, and to me that kind of resonated only because on my dad's side of the family, he's from Yuba City. And I remember going to grandma's during summers when I was in elementary school and seeing my cousins from Gridley in the Marysville area there. You know, I was a city kid, so I have core memories of this wonderful place, Yuba City. It's where I saw my first earthworm digging through a mud puddle with my cousins, and I yelled, "Snake!" and they just laughed at me, you know, city kid. It's where my uncle was a tomato inspector, and I remember fondly that he would have a little fire going as he looked at the tomatoes in the backyard, and he would pick off those hornworms and throw them right in there to get rid of them. It's also a place where I remember helping with the peaches and taking peaches to the cannery and realizing that when you're canning peaches, they certainly don't smell as good as when you're actually just eating those canned peaches. The smell was horrible. And especially the mornings when cousins and I would wake up to the sound of the crop duster planes flying overhead, basically in the field next to us. And I think of that now, and not quite fond memories. I'm not sure what I was breathing in, but at least I'm still here right now. So in honor of my dad, because 2023 was kind of a banner year, although he passed away already, he would have been 100 that year. And I had spent pretty much all of that year compiling his information from 40 years of military service and from his days at Amachi that he had a lot of photos of. There was so much from the Korean War and from Vietnam where he was undercover. And when I saw this project come up, I thought, wow, this is another way that I can kind of honor him through his family, through the farming community. And so in January, I started with my first project, which was proofing, checking names against a spreadsheet. That was great. I thought maybe I'd use my Japanese language ability and background on that. But it was kind of frustrating because there were a lot of names that just weren't matching up. They weren't spelled correctly. And so I would kind of make note of that. But there wasn't a system in place yet to make any corrections on that. But later, things changed. Amanda has updated the spreadsheet, I think at least 3 times maybe since then. We've gone through different iterations. And eventually we got to a point where we were able to take a lot of other information. And among the information that my group, the Packer team, does is, in my team, we look at military service. Did the person serve in the military? And we're looking even as far back as World War I. Incarceration sites, not just the main places like Manzanara, Machi, or the other places, but we're also looking at the assembly centers too. We very carefully check the spelling of names and any alternate names. And by that, for example, my dad is written up as female in the WRA records, and it's because probably his first name was K. We want to make sure that the records are correct, and so we look up on various sources to see, you know, do we have the right person? Does the birth date correspond? There are so many kind of checks and balances in place. Sometimes this requires an amendment to IREZO, and we have a kind of a system in place where our volunteers, the Packers, can tell me if they have noticed that something seems off. We have to have at least 3 bits of information that conclusively say that either maybe a site was missing, maybe the name was misspelled, or even the birth date. If the birth date was off by a year or something, sometimes it's hard to find them. So we are responsible for making sure that the information we find is correct. And it's also very important in the most recent spreadsheets, we've been able to indicate if the person is female, and by that it would be the farmer. It would be somebody that the farmer might have vested interest in the farm to. It would have been their partner, and also it is the substitute operator, the person who took over. If they were female, we note that too. The fact that there were so many female role models involved in farming is really important. And I've seen records where the head of the household was a woman with 6, 7 kids, and she was widowed. And you know, you read this and you imagine, wow, how did she move? During this time, it was only what she could carry, and she's got these little kids just lined up. It's kind of mind-boggling. It's very emotional. We also look up the alien land ownership records because it's very important, and unfortunately, if I recall, we don't have any for Oregon and Washington, correct? Or are they just hidden somewhere? Ah, okay. So there's going to be more work to do on that. Okay. Here are some of the sites that we use. And this is, I know I've got the volunteers back there going, yeah, walk the farm, IREZO, everything. There are so many websites that we use as a system of checks and balances to make sure we have the right person. We look at birth dates, it has been mentioned. We look at obituaries. It's kind of a taxing position because we do tend to read a lot of obituary because they will give nicknames, alternate names. Somebody might be known as, or legally as Henry, but others in the community will have known him as Hank. Others are written on the card as Tosh, but is that person Toshio or Toshiko or Toshinobu? So we want to get every possible spelling and alternate name that we can. One of the most recent examples that one of my Packers and I went through is she was looking up a record and she was really troubled by the fact that one person had 2 different spellings, one with an A, another with an O. And the alternate spelling that was showing up with this person's yearbook photo had an O in it, which was a really strange spelling. It wasn't how most people would spell his name. And I said, well, what does find a grave say? So we looked at find a grave, and sure enough, it did say the A spelling with his name, but it didn't show a picture. And so we couldn't positively prove that, well, I guess it is, even though you tend to kind of go by an obituary, which we couldn't find. So I thought, well, wait a minute, I can solve this. I live near Oak Hill. It was at the local cemetery just 2 miles away from where I live. So I drove there the other day, and I talked to the office, and I found out where this person was buried. And I managed to kind of find that area, and there at the gravesite was a stone, and it did have the alternate spelling with the O that we would not have considered. That was a very unusual spelling for his first name. And so I was able to take a picture of that. I was able to submit an IRESO amendment for the Packer. And through that photo, we were able to change the search in Find a Grave so that this person can now be found by their correct name. And I'll say, I was so happy to find that. And he was a veteran just like my dad. He served in Korea, he served in Vietnam, and he was a Bronze Star recipient. And it was so nice to be able to say a prayer for him and say, we've been looking for you. I'm so glad we found you. It's that important. That is what this team, this final team does. We make sure everything is correct. And if we can't find what we find as an undisputed spelling or whatever, we'll put it in our notes that, it could possibly be because we couldn't quite pinpoint it 100%. But it's not good enough for us to say, we think. It's probably. Because it's probably is how my dad ended up as female in the WRA records. We don't want that to happen with the records that we've been entrusted with. It's just been such an emotional process, and I think if you ask anyone, especially in the group that I am just so privileged to work with, how they feel about it, they do need, I like to tell them, take a break, because it's emotional, because we read obituaries, but we see stories of resilience, we see stories of pain, we see stories of people coming back and hoping but not finding what they thought they'd left behind, and we see the stories of neighbors who've saved their land for them and have taken care of their land. So we go through the whole gamut of emotions. We go through, I say it's almost like a mini obon every time we finish a record, because we're acknowledging the fact that they existed and they're very important. They're no longer just that card, but they have become, at least in our hearts, a person for each of us. Thank you.
So we're so lucky to have so many dedicated volunteers and people of such enormous integrity working on this project, and people who take it so seriously, right? And who want to do such a good job for you and for our ancestors. And there is a little bit of a, almost a supernatural quality to this work, where our young volunteers will say that they dream about what it would be like to be a farmer back in the day, or they think about it, or they can feel it, they can empathize. So returning to the data set that we prepared for you, I wanted to just share with you some of the highlights about the contributions of Nikkei farmers in this area. Overall, this project is not about aggregation. It's about disaggregation. It's about taking these big files and making them individual, accessible human stories. But for this group, we're going to do some regional overview, so you have a sense of the scope. So in this area, in our record set, which I believe is an incomplete record set, there are two others that I think would add to this. There were 371 Nikkei operators in Santa Clara with a total acreage of 11,729 acres. and on average that was 31.61 acres per tract for a piece of land. In Santa Cruz, it was 130 operators, 2,610 acres, average acres per tract, 20. In San Benito, it was 114 operators, acreage was 5,395, average acres per tract, 47.32. So, very typically, Japanese Americans had smaller pieces of land that they used much more productively, right? And that maybe could be managed through family labor and some additional supports. I would like to invite up one of our advisory committee members. This is a project that involves a lot of different types of volunteers, and one of those types of volunteers is the advisory committee. And we have a very loyal and dedicated committee. John Funabiki is a retired professor of journalism, retired journalist. He worked for the Ford Foundation. He's a producer on a couple of documentaries. I think he does some acting. I think you can see him in Kintsugi Kuroi, right? Barely. Good enough, good enough. Hey, give it up for John Funabiki.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this event. And Amanda, thank you for, assembling this group here. I just love this project. And let me just first say that I actually know Amanda from a different kind of a life, from her writing life.
In the unforgotten country, our paths are lined by lodestones from the past and the present, broken planters, magnificent grievances, the warnings of our ancestors, and the spirits who wait for us in dark places to urge us to take good care of ourselves and each other.
In the meantime, we have since been able to collaborate on a few projects kind of in the journalism and media field. We got to know each other, and we love doing those collaborations. And then one day, Amanda called me and said, "John, I found all these cards about Japanese farmers. I think there's something here, and I want to start looking into it." She explained what they were, as she has been doing here today. And I said, "Amanda, my father and my grandfather were farmers." She said, "What's their name?" I told them, and a little while later, she sent me an email with a copy of this card, like the ones you've been seeing. Oh, there it is, right there. And I was absolutely blown away, because as she knew, I had been doing my own little personal journey, trying to explore my family's history. My grandfather and my father and his brother ran this farm in Mountain View before the war, but I knew nothing about it because, of course, they just didn't tell us kids. Most of my family's passed away now, of that generation. I have one aunt left. I just needed to find out what is the history, what was their experience through the war. I needed to understand what my father did in the military, because he got drafted into the Army from Heart Mountain. And so there are all these kind of questions I had. Told Amanda I was just totally blown away by this idea. And that's when she asked, "Could you be on my advisory committee?" Of course, I had to say yes. That's the easiest job. I'm blown away by the presentations by the volunteers and the work you're doing. It sounds painstaking, kind of hard work to do. Emotional, as it has been explained. Fun, exciting, full of discoveries. And I was thinking you should rename them to, the title should be Strawberry Investigators or Strawberry Detectives. Okay? Because I think it's so much fun. And if you want to, so this is a picture of a family here. On the left is my grandfather's family, and my father is in there, and the aunts and uncles. That's the farmhouse in Mountain View. I've yet to find the exact location, but it is roughly on the west side of US 101, across from Moffett Field. I'm still trying to pin that down. Oh, you can't quite see it, but the porch profile of that little portico, it's kind of that curved porch. The story goes that my grandfather, when he built that house, hired a guy who designed Buddhist temples. And so that's why we got that little curve on the porch. And this is my father and my mother, my older brother who was born in Heart Mountain, and my older sister who was born in Minnesota, where they were staying in Minnesota while my father was going through MIS training. These are some of the links I have. I just want to thank all of you folks for putting your heart and soul into this project and helping Amanda. I have the really easy job. Being an advisor, all I do is every once in a while, Amanda calls a meeting of all the advisors, and she tells us all the exciting things you guys are doing. And we say, God bless you, and keep going. And I just want to commend you all, commend Amanda for doing this. It's really important. I mean, I feel it every time I hear one of these presentations. I just feel it. I was blown away by that figure. Japanese American farmers accounted for 40% of the state's agricultural production when the war broke out. That's an incredible contribution. It's really not well known and recognized by not only us, but by the general population. I think it's important that we do this for our families and for ourselves, but also we do it for American history. That we need to keep these stories available so that all Americans can understand what our ancestors experienced, the history of the incarceration, the history of their contributions to the agricultural industry, and the social injustices that they experienced, so that, again, it does not happen again. And we are really on the cusp of that threat of something like this happening again. So that's what I think you guys are doing. You're kind of that wall of defense to prevent something bad from happening again. But again, each of these stories is so important and so valuable, and thank you.
Thank you, John. Wonderful advisory committee member. Really appreciate you as a friend and a supporter. And what's next? So we completed this particular record set, and there are actually, this is news to the volunteers, so stay tuned. There are actually 2 other data sets that we didn't tackle because they were very complicated, and I'll give you a sample of them. This is one, they're handwritten, very difficult for AI or any kind of reader to pick up, extremely detailed about what's on the land. It includes the creditor information, it includes financial information, legal. A lot of these farmers had powers of attorney in somebody. So it also shows that this particular farmer had 35 acres in grapes, 2.5 in strawberries, and it shows the crop value. This farmer ended up losing the land. The descendants trying to figure it out still what happened, but we can see from the records that the people who took over did not pay their utility bills. They did not pay all these little bills that led to this farmer being pursued by a creditor. And you can see how much value is on that farm as compared to his mortgage, right? So for families, this really tells a much fuller story. And here's another similar record that, as you can tell, is very hard to read. Sorry, you guys. My volunteers are like, what? And I'm so grateful to the volunteers because they are really the most extraordinary, wonderful, dedicated, serious people. And they range in age from Gosei and younger, right, to Sansei. And so these are the records that actually have a lot more detail, and they include the nursery people. They include the greenhouses who are left out of the other record set. They include the flower growers who are left out, and they just have that kind of numerical data as well as the family information here. So I'm hoping that this will be our next project when we finish the Pacific Northwest. I wanted to wrap by providing some quotes, some different perspectives on this project from different generations. So this is from a Nisei. There was actually a Nisei who came to one of our events, and he said, "I'm the last of my family to farm in America. I retired last year after 48 years. I never farmed for myself. I worked and managed others' farming operations. I never had the opportunity to have my own farm, but I am okay with that. Shikata ganai." From a Sansei, "As I was entering data from the cards, I began to feel like all the people were my aunties and uncles. I felt a certain sense of pride." From a Yonsei, "The event was incredibly fascinating, heartwarming, inspiring, and beautiful. I cried many times." And from a Gosei, "By doing this project, I was able to observe, envision how much was taken away from these families. I thought about their current and future livelihood that was lost, and how mentally and emotionally that must have felt to lose their homes and farms." And in fact, young people will say, "This is the first time I thought about that, or I envisioned it." And I get just amazing questions from young people. Like a young person asked me, "Where were babies born back then?" And I've been asked, like, why didn't more white relatives pitch in to take care of these farms? And it's just a good real world context for understanding the legal environment of the time. I am going to transition off and say that I am really appreciative of all of you showing up today. Just the fact that we had this amazing turnout shows how many people want to heal their history, just connect the dots, right? And appreciate their ancestors so much and want to hold and cherish their ancestors. I want to also introduce Larry Hirahara, who's going to speak in a moment. He's an officer for ACE, Asian Cultural Experience of Salinas. And when my project first started, I knew that he had a parallel project in Salinas, and so I sent him some records so he could understand my project. And he said, "Hey Amanda, thanks for sending my maternal grandfather's record." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, that's my family record." So out of the thousands of records, the one I end up sending Larry is his own family record. So thank you. Larry has been a great friend to the project. And I'm also really honored to introduce Diane Shinta Durst, who is from the legendary strawberry farming family around here. I got to know Diane through her sister Gwen Coda, who is still farming in Watsonville. With no Q&A. Okay, here we go. Ready to go.
Okay, Diane, would you like to do a self-introduction?
Konnichiwa. Diane Shinta Durst desu. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. You know how everybody hears phrases throughout their lives? This is a phrase that I've heard throughout my whole life. You're Kuni Shinta's daughter, aren't you? And I go, yeah, how'd you know? You look just like him. And I do. I've come to understand that I look exactly like my dad. It's not that I'm his doppelganger or anything like that. Obviously, it's my father. I'm his Twitter. But I do have the face of Hiroshima Ken, Shobara, way up in the mountains. I've been there. I know it for a fact. So in 2009, my father was 85. You know, he knew himself really well. He said, you know, I'm not feeling good, but let's do something. And this is what we did. It's a memory book. And what you're about to see are his memories of growing up in Santa Clara Valley as a Nisei son of Issei immigrants, what that experience was like. Let's fast forward to 2019. 2019, my father passed away, by the way, in 2009. So in 2019, I was living in San Francisco. I'm a member of the Buddhist Church of San Francisco. It's a Jodo Shinshu temple. I was working at Chirashi shift for a fundraiser. A woman comes up to me. I don't know her, but her name was Yoshiko. She said, "Are you the person that brought the strawberries to the Ginza Bazaar?" I said, "Well, yes, I am." And she said, "Boy, somebody really wants to meet you." And it's like, "They do?" And she said, "Yes." And the person who wanted to meet me was somebody who was working on their doctoral thesis. Their thesis was about actually California farming, farm to table. I don't really know anything about farm to table, but she wanted to go to my sister and brother-in-law's farm in Watsonville. I met her in Santa Cruz because that's where she was doing her thing. We went to lunch. I showed her the contents of this book. She included that in her thesis. It's in Japanese. She actually taught at a place called Keisen, which is a Japanese Christian women's university. That place is closed now. But she still works in Japan teaching. This is Midori's name. This is the name of her university that she got her degree from. I actually do speak a little Japanese, and I read and write as well. I think I read to the level of a second grader. It's also where the level I speak at as well. But I will be translating this. It's going to take me a long time. But included is what I told her on 5 or 6 pages. I am listed as a contributor, and I'm also in the footnotes. So that's not bad for a strawberry farmer's daughter, yes? So here's my story. This is the village of Kamidani. It's in Hiroshima Ken. It's way in the mountains. It actually doesn't exist as a community anymore. It's now called Shobara, and I think it's very popular for glamping. When I went there, it was like, oh God, there's nothing here. My bachan is 4th from your left on the bottom row. That's Hisayo Ida. which was her maiden name. She's about, I think, 15 years old. At the age of 18, he would go to her arranged marriage's family's home. I don't know how many days she spent there, but she ran off. Actually ended up, she ran off to Osaka, where her brother had a sake store. So she became a sake seller from age 18 to age 25. I know my bachan really well, and I can tell you the reason why she ran off. She knew that if she stayed with that family, that she would have been super unhappy. She's very willful. She's very self-directed. I know this because she lived with us for a long time. So I lived with her until I was 20 years old. So then she became a picture bride. In 1914, she was a picture bride to Genjiro Shin, and he said that he would like Hisayo to come to San Francisco as his wife. He actually had to prove the ability. I don't have those documents. I do own them, but he was living in the Coyote Valley, had worked as a fruit picker. He did actually have money, according to that document, $500, which if you think about 1914, that's a ton of money. That was a lot. This is where he picked fruit, in San Jose, in the Coyote Valley. There was actually a significant age difference. Let me go back. This is my bachan's immigration document from 1914. He was significantly younger than he was. He was 25 and he was 42. But my father told me that Genjiro Shin would be the love of my bachan's life. And he had provided Hisayo with a rented house and some land around it so she could grow vegetables and fruits like strawberries. You remember the alien land laws? So even with $500 saved up, you couldn't buy acreage if you were Japanese. You just couldn't. But you still could rent land. In spite of that level of discrimination, Hisayo had a happy life in California. The love of her life, she loved fruit. What was interesting is that when she arrived in California in 1914, she would never have eaten a strawberry. The strawberries in Japan, strawberries were only eaten by the emperor. That's who grew strawberries in Japan. Only the emperor, and they were only for him. That was actually what the researcher in Japan, Midori, found out. This is actually new. And strawberry growing prior to World War II, I believe generally a woman's provenance. And the reason why I say this, if you look at these two pictures from this book, it's entitled Dorothea Lange and the Censored Images of Japanese American Internment. But she also included in this book images of Japanese before internment. This is a Mountain View strawberry truck farm. What interested my Japanese researcher, she saw the laundry, the woman, and the children. So I am certain that's what my bachan did. She grew those strawberries. In this picture of a Florence strawberry farm, you notice it's the wife, it's the mother that is growing the strawberries as she sends her son off to World War II. This is actually a woman's story. It's women that grew strawberries. It was next to the house. Trade your strawberries for vegetables from other members in the community. I know this to be true because growing up, I never ate a canned or frozen vegetable. It was always something that, was traded. They would come to my family's farm and drop off beans or broccoli or whatever. So that's actually, I think, why women grew strawberries. It was so they could be social, omiyage. You bring strawberries to your friends, they give you something back. That's the reason why I, in my soul, believe that, women were the ones that grew strawberries. And of course, this whole area was known for its amazing produce. Not many, I think, could grow fruit trees because fruit trees, it takes forever for them to start to grow. You actually have to have the confidence to own your own land. I think that was the other reason why they chose to grow a fruit like strawberry, raspberries, something that grows fast. For my bachan, Japan. It was a bigger and better life for her here than any life she would have had in Japan. This is my bachan as Nihonjin housewife. 7 years after she arrived, Jinjiro Shin and Hisayo Shin now had been trying to have children. After 7 years, this little girl was born. They were blessed with a girl named Mikio. After Mikio's birth, Jinjiro Shin passed away from a ruptured appendicitis at the age of 49. And this is his funeral. I think my bachan is kind of in the dark in the center. My dad says this is his funeral. Shortly after this, the Hiroshima Kenjin-kai, which is the local group of persons from Hiroshima-ken, told my bachan, Hisayo, that she must return to Japan as she couldn't live here alone with her baby. Hisayo adamantly told them, no, she refused. And she said she can take care of herself. This I truly believe because, like I said, she was pretty willful and she didn't need any help. So the Hiroshima Kenjin-kai sent Wasaku Shinta to be her live-in protector. Wasaku Shinta is my grandfather. And he actually started his immigration process in 1902. He went to Hawaii with his wife, who I don't know her name, and they were to pick pineapples. She died while he was in Hawaii. And so he immigrated to California on the SS Alameda in 1906. He was here way before she was. There was actually a huge age difference between Hisayo and Wasaku. It was almost 20 years. Like Hisayo, Wasaku was from Kamidani. He had left Kamidani in 1902 and went to Hawaii. And they left their son, Kaneshiro. He never made it to Hawaii. He was raised in Kamidani, probably by his grandparents. So life in the pineapple fields, yeah, it was really rough. She died. He immigrated in 1906. And in 1922, after Wasaku moved in with my bachan, with Hisayo, Mikio Shin was forevermore known as Mikio Shinta, even as a baby. So this is her baby picture. It says Mikio Shinta. After around 1922, I believe, Wasaku and Hisayo had a son, Kenji. Then in 1924, my father was born. That's Kunito. And then they also had a daughter in 1926 named Pauline Shigeko. Mikio was always known as Mikio Shinta. I have to tell you, my father told me that he adored Mikio. So this is a picture of my family in 1930. And Wasaku moved everybody to Mountain View, Sunnyvale area. Hisayo would continue to grow strawberries. And this is her strawberry field on Mayfield Road in Mountain View. Now, right now, I think what's sitting on Mayfield Road in Mountain View is a Google building. Way before it was that. This is a picture from 1931. And these are all of her friends. Her friends would come and help pick and all that. As I say, this is how Japanese women lived. This is how they made, it's not really money, but, for fruit and vegetables. As an exchange gift for manju and things like that. The Shintas actually became well off as vegetable farmers. In 1930, they had a car. And it was actually a pretty nice one too. It has like these spoke wheels. And so inside are the Shinta family. In 1931, my bachan Sayo went to Japan to visit her family. I know she went and took these pictures with her to brag at her family. Hey, look at how I did, because that's her too. This is Haneshiro's wedding in 1934. It's in front of their home on Bush Street in Mountain View. He married a beautiful woman named Michiko. They had a very elaborate wedding party at the Tri-City Hall in Mountain View. Kaneshiro was a difficult person. My father remembers him as he would drive and take them around in the car, but he had like this huge gambling problem. In 1937, Kaneshiro got kicked out of the Shinta family because he gambled away $70,000 of the family's money. Now, they had been large pea growers and very successful. Kaneshiro had been president of the Pea Growers Association. They were very well off considering the time. If you think about 1934, $70,000, incredible. But he did do that. So he got kicked out of the family. His wife would die of tuberculosis because she would, in 1941, because she would stay with him while he stayed up all night and gambled. Those are bad habits. And in those days, tuberculosis was fairly common. So the Shinta stopped their large acreage farming. In 1941, Mikio got married to Yoshio Nishimoto. In 1942, Second World War would start, and the Shintas and the Nishimotos all ended up at Heart Mountain. This actually ends my Kansha strawberry story, but it's not the end of my strawberry story. In December of 2024, my son Daniel and his cousin Joanna went to Tochigi Prefecture. The reason I sent them there was I had been told that my father was a legend in Tochigi Prefecture. He taught them how to farm strawberries. You know how big strawberries are in Japan now. And Tochigi is considered the premier strawberry growing region. When I say that my family is legendary, it's legendary. Because my dad ended up going around the world teaching people how to grow strawberries. By the way, if you go to Tochigi and you go to a strawberry place, you go to a strawberry farm like this, you got to try their strawberry flavored Kit Kat. It's spectacular. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu.